we have this notion that balance means equality.
Yes.
And they are not the same. If you look at a scale and you're looking to balance the scale, half the time you don't have an equal amount on one side that you have on the other. It is not equal. It is finding where things actually weigh out. Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I am your host, Amber, and today I am here with co-host Austin, and we're going to talk about giving and receiving. I mean, 'tis the season. It is heading into December when a lot of holidays begin to happen, and we focus a lot on the act of giving and the act of receiving, and sometimes we wonder, is it out of balance? And that's kind of what we want to talk about throughout the entire month, especially when we talk about leadership and leading from a heart-centered space. Because often when we look across all aspects of our life, from career to family to even our own personal well-being, it is a time when giving and receiving can really get thrown out of balance. Whether you celebrate a holiday in the month of December or not, we're looking towards starting the new year. And a lot of times we begin to question, like, have I taken care of myself? Have I really taken the time throughout this year to do the things that nurture me? So whether we're celebrating any type of a holiday on the calendar year in the month of December or not, many of us at least begin to look back over the course of the year and ask those types of questions. So we're going to start talking about it from that point of view because, we do talk about it a lot from a holiday perspective, but I want to talk about it from the energetic perspective and what the holidays can do to our energy from a giving and receiving standpoint and what reflecting on the year can do on our view of giving and receiving from that energetic standpoint. Because speaking from my own review of my life, when I would hit the end of the year, I felt like I was at the end of a marathon. And having run a marathon before, it's like you get to that end and it's like, I'm so tired. I don't know if I'm going to cross the finish line. But it's also like that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm at the end. I don't care if I have to crawl. I'm going to cross this finish line. And I feel like a lot of us, at least talking to friends and family from an energetic standpoint, that's what the month of December ends up feeling like. You're at the end of a year-long marathon. And it's like, I don't think I have the energy to wrap this thing up. Yet it's like, I don't care. I'm going to button this year up so that I can start next year and do something different. But I think we have, if we look at it from a giving and receiving kind of standpoint, we have an opportunity to flip that and do something different in the month of December. So I want to hear your perspective and what your experience of like that final month of the year has felt like from an energetic standpoint.
Great question. I would say for many, if that is the feeling, then that's probably a telltale sign that things are out of balance, right? Because no matter where we are and what we're doing throughout any part of the year, if it does feel like it's the end of a marathon and you need this big break and all that, like, yeah, there's probably some sense of feeling out of balance. And it's tough. It's natural. We're kind of taught that everything should be building up, and at the end of the year we take a break, and that's kind of just what humanity has done for quite a few years now, especially now that holidays have become more mainstream and businesses take a lot of time off, and it's just kind of set up in that way, at least here in the US with Thanksgiving and then the different holiday season that many people enjoy, depending on their belief system, at the end of toward sometime in December. It could be mid or end of December. Some companies take all of December off. And so I know, like when I was in college, for example, we had Thanksgiving till after New Year's off. And so that was a big time. So we pushed all throughout the year, and then that was the flow. So in many ways, we're kind of set up to be out of balance because it's so front loaded.
Yes.
And that's a difficult thing. So it is a great, I love what you're saying and what you're bringing forward, because it is a good reflection point. It's a great way to say, hey, if this is occurring and I feel like I'm just about to collapse at the end of a big marathon, then what do I need to do to create more balance all throughout the year so that I can actually finish strong? Like those marathon runners who, not only just push through, but they balance. They're not doing a huge sprint out of the gate and then have no energy at the end of the race. They're finding ebb and flow throughout it so they can push strong and finish strong at the end of the year, or at the end of the race.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's important. And then recognizing that our society is set up for that front-loaded approach with kind of a collapse at the end. So how can we realign that so that doesn't affect us individually?
Yeah. And I fully understand, like when we talk about cycles, right? Yeah. There are multiple different approaches to cycles. You can have very distinct seasons, if you look at it from a seasonal perspective, where you just completely shut down for one season, and then you have a slow rebirth, and then you have a flourishing season, and then you have a slow shutdown aspect until you fully shut down. If you think of a strong winter, a spring, a summer, and an autumn. Or you can have a season or a cycle like we have here in the Phoenix, Arizona space, where it's very mild and it isn't that harsh of an up and a down. And so it depends on the kind of balance that calls to you. But I think what we're highlighting is part of giving and receiving is understanding what that balance is for you. Mm-hmm. Like if you get to the end of a year and you're like, okay, I can't make it into another year. I'm feeling drained. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling like this just does not fit for me. Then that means that your balance is not fitting for you. Those approaches to your year are just not working. So take the time to figure out, okay, what's not balanced for me? Maybe this full-on winter to spring to summer to fall, where it's high highs and low lows, isn't fitting for you. That's not your way of going through your cycle. Maybe you need more of mild approach. And so that's where you need to start looking at your energetics of giving and receiving. Are you giving too much throughout the year and not replenishing yourself? Is there something that just isn't in balance to where by the end of the year you feel like, I don't want to do another year of this?
So well said. It really is that pitcher of water in many ways, where we're constantly pouring from the pitcher of water to all the glasses around, and eventually gets empty. But if it's an overflowing pitcher of water, the pitcher remains full, but the glasses also receive from it too. And so it's definitely a lot easier to find balance when you feel full and fulfilled. And that way it is a balanced giving and receiving. But I think the struggle that many people, and there's still, you and I talk about this all the time. We are so ingrained for so many years to be told that we need to sacrifice ourselves in order to be a good person. We need to be constantly giving of ourselves in order to be a good person, whether that's of things or emotion or time or thought or even a spiritual give, devotion. There's so many different aspects of our humanness that we're constantly giving, and not to discount, because it's a very, very beautiful thing in many ways. But with this whole idea of, I feel like over the years, especially maybe over the last 30 years with social media and things like that, the idea of narcissism has grown exponentially. And I feel like many people experience or see others who are flowing through that. And so there's almost this fear of not wanting to be that. And so the idea of giving or receiving to self in any of those aspects almost becomes a pause. And so it's definitely a difficult balance to find that. And so sometimes we have to realize that when we are giving to ourselves, it does provide more opportunity to give to others. And so, and I know it's in some ways it's basic and we can understand that and we hear that. It's definitely harder in practice because there are so many things like, hey, am I worthy enough? Or do I love myself enough? Or am I confident enough in where I'm at? Do I even know what balance looks like to me? Which I feel like is a huge aspect that we've been so out of balance that the vision of what does balance look like for me is something that we're never taught to take the time to reflect and identify and get clarity on.
I think right there is the biggest question.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest questions for me, right? And I know it's one of the key questions for every person that I coach in the beginning. And we might not even approach it as what does balance look like, right? Because we have this notion that balance means equality.
Yes.
And they are not the same. If you look at a scale and you're looking to balance the scale, half the time you don't have an equal amount on one side that you have on the other. It is not equal. It is finding where things actually weigh out and feel in harmony for you, right? It does not mean equal parts because that is never going to bring things fully into alignment for someone. We have to figure out what makes harmony and synergy for us based on what feels in alignment, in ratio in our lives. And that's going to be different for me than it is for you because we are unique. So like a ratio of golf in my life would be going to see you play golf a few times per season. That ratio would not fit for you. It would so not fit for you. You would be miserable. You need to go play golf once a week. I would be miserable with that ratio of golf in my life. So we have to figure out the balance of golf in our life.
Yeah.
That's so important. But we don't start out talking about balance. We start out talking about what is it that I desire my experience of this world to be.
Yeah.
And that is broken down component by component by component. And once we can firmly understand right now, for this part of my life, this is what I desire my life experience to look like. It might be different a week from now. It might be different a year from now. And that's okay, because that's part of being human. As I learn, as I grow, as I evolve within myself, within my family, and within my community, that's going to change. Because that's the constant, right? Our consciousness shifts, our knowing of self shifts, and so things change. But right now, I have a firm handle on the experience of my life that I desire. And from there, then I can choose what I need to in order to create that experience. But if I don't even know what I desire, how can I choose anything that will create that desired experience? But most of us don't know what we desire. And so we have to start from that point. What do I desire to experience in my everyday work? Let alone a career. What do I desire to experience when I go in and I contribute to society every day? What do I desire when I am in a partnership, whatever that looks like? What do I desire when I engage with my family? What do I desire when I'm completely by myself? And when I can answer those things, then I know what I desire to receive from an engagement, and I know what I desire to give. And then I can have balance. then I can have balance. But until then, we don't even know what balance looks like. And so that's the very first thing we have to do. And that's why we have like a giving and receiving journal, right? Because we can start there. We can start looking at the categories and saying, okay, I know what I desire my experience to be. Now, once I start creating that experience, I might go, oh, heck no. I was way off. That sounded really good on paper. It is not so good in practical experience.
I feel like all of that is such a good approach. And I really like the term harmony. I feel like that's even stronger than balance. The beautiful thing that I feel like when I hear harmony is related to music, right? And we can have a symphony. A symphony has many different instruments playing different notes, different experiences, the whole thing. It's some louder, some softer, some different melodies, different octaves. I mean, there's so many different things that are aspects of it, but it works well because there's a direction, there's purpose, and it creates a harmony. And so I feel like when doing the journal, for example, each one of those boxes is like a different instrument that we can start to kind of place together to build the symphony of life that we're desiring. And sometimes, like for me, maybe golf is like cowbell, right? And I'm like, babe, I need more cowbell, so I need more cowbell in my symphony. And so that's where we can really start to understand that giving and receiving is being in harmony. And so these different aspects of our life are the different instruments that then create the song or the symphony of our life that we're experiencing. And at any point, we can change the note. We can change the tone. I mean, that's what a conductor does. The conductor helps guide. Like, is it conductor or am I talking about trains? Okay.
No.
So I was like, wait, am I saying the right thing here?
You're right.
So yeah, the conductor. And so they can help the different instruments and navigate, okay, well, hey, this note, maybe not. It's very common for a conductor to introduce a new instrument and say, oh, how does this work? It's not the right fit. Red idea, cool idea, just didn't fit. And I feel like that's very similar to what you're saying. So we have to be willing to write it down, seek clarity, get that understanding, test it out, and then see if it fits. And harmony is all about build. So you can grow and you can build on a harmony. Maybe it's not quote unquote infinite, but I feel like it's infinite in its possibility. And so if you find that flow, you can start to interchange different instruments and continue your tune as you grow.
Agreed. So think of yourself as both the composer and the conductor, right?
Yeah. Composer is the word. That's the word. Yeah, I was talking trains then.
Well, you have the conductor who's like leading it, but then you also have the composer who's writing it. And so you're both, right? As you're going through, you are the composer of your experience, but you're also the conductor of it. Like, as it's in motion, you're the one that's leading the flow of it. And so only we can determine by the choices we make how things are going to continue to evolve. And so when I was at the point where at the end of every year, I felt like I was crawling over the finish line of a marathon, then I was the one that was running a marathon like a sprint race. Instead of doing what, as you so intelligently pointed out, good marathon runners do, which is pacing it and making certain that I wasn't exhausted by the end. Novice marathon runners run a marathon like a sprint race. But I would say the majority of the people that I knew were still running the year like a sprint race because that's the best that we knew how to do. Deadlines kept you up all night long. We were constantly burning the candle at both ends. There were so many things with kids that needed to be done throughout the school year. And yes, all we had was that one sliver of time that we all looked forward to at the end of the year where we could get together and relax. But who relaxed? Because then there were gifts to shop for. There were meals to cook. There were family get-togethers that we had. There were friend get-togethers that we had. There were parties that we had. There was no real rest time. And so then it was the final push instead of the actual time to reflect. And in that narrow window of time that I personally got to reflect, what I was actually doing was going, how do I make it through next year? The way that I made it through this year. And how did things get so out of whack? And how can I make little adjustments? But in the time that I got, there wasn't enough time to really figure that out. So what did I do? Hopped right back on the hamster wheel and started running again until I said no. Until I said no. And I took the time and just shut everything down and figured out a different way. Right? And so I'm saying we don't have to do that. There's a different thing that we can do, and that's to take that time intermittently versus having to completely jump off the wheel.
Right. I love that. It's very natural when hearing giving and receiving to want to think of physical things. And so it's hard to recognize that it's multiple things like mental, emotional, spiritual, even process or life flow. And so, yes, it's the holidays. And yes, this is a very top of mind and top of heart for many people in terms of giving, receiving. But I really like how you're expressing that it's all year round. And that intermittently means that, hey, maybe once a quarter or at the end of every month, taking that time to refresh, or, maybe it's just maybe all you need is one day a month at the end of the month to kind of be that bookend, say, okay, well, here's what I did really well. And that was a good flow for me over the last month, over the last 30 days. Here are the habits that are helping me grow. Here are the habits that are holding me back. And next month, this is what I want to do. I want to test this out. Maybe I'll change one little thing here and one thing there, and then see how this goes. And you can make that gradual shift. There was that one, I know we've talked about it on a podcast before, but when we say that if we just change 1% a day in 100 days, we're at 100% difference, right? And so it really can be that approachable. And so with there being over 300 days, that means we can make a lot of change in 1 year. But if we're so focused on getting lost in the process and we're not taking that time to reflect, then it feels like a scramble at the end. And I get that for some people that works. And we're not here to tell everyone like, hey, that doesn't work. And so some people, hey, that's great. But I think you bring up a good point. When it does get time to actually relax, are they really taking the time to relax? And maybe that's the question. Because I know I've gotten there where, hey, pushing for a whole year and it feels great. And then I'm like, yes, because in December, I'm going to take the whole month or a couple weeks off, or, I'm actually going to relax. And then I never did. And then by January, halfway through January, I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't even get this year started. And so now I'm behind. And so and then I think that compounds over years and years and years. And that's where many people struggle in finding the harmony of giving and receiving.
Because what we actually do is we push off everything else thinking, oh, I'm going to get the whole month of December off.
Yes.
I'll take care of it in December.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? You have this list that's like a mile long that you need to take care of, either house projects or whatever. Yeah. And so the time really never actualizes. And so that's a big part of it too. And part of the reason we created like the 90-day declutter that we have, the course offering, is for that very reason. Because it's easy to get into the cycle of like even pushing off until spring or until the end of the year, decluttering not just your personal space, but your mental and emotional space within your body, right?
Right.
I found that at the beginning of every year, I would be like, okay, this is my time, because it seems to be as a collective whole, as a human whole, we like to start the year off like, okay, here we go, new year, new me kind of thing, which we'll talk about at the beginning of the year, why that could potentially be not the new start that we think that it is. But I did that myself for a while. And then what I found was, well, what I've done is like I've created this closet where all this crap gets shoved. And I never really did much other than clean a few little things out of the closet, because then I was back on the wheel. And so this closet turned into the whole room, turned into 2 rooms of clutter, turned into a whole house. And you can't really do much, because then you get paralyzed, not just from the actual physical clutter that happens, but your physical is a representation of what's going on inside. And so when we start to declutter our physical space, we have to declutter what's going on inside of us mentally, emotionally, energetically. It's tied. And we suggest doing that every 90 days and doing it together, doing it simultaneously, because then it isn't all saved for one time of the year. It is a consistent process where we're going, okay, as above, so below. As inside of me, so too am I creating outside of me. If I'm creating a whole bunch of clutter or a whole bunch of stress outside of me, then there's probably a whole lot of that going on inside of me. And again, it does link back to giving and receiving. If I'm not receiving something, then I cannot give it. And so we have to link the processes together. If I am not giving myself time to go through and emotionally take care of myself, to mentally take care of myself, to physically take care of myself, then I cannot give time to someone else to support them mentally, emotionally, physically. And so we are disconnecting from what is around us. Yeah. And I think that's for me personally, it has been worth visiting one day every 90 days.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like there is a fundamental misunderstanding of how tied giving and receiving actually is. It's almost like it's viewed as its poles on like opposite poles.
Yeah.
When the reality is the coexistence aspect that they are, because they can be interchanged even when it's to yourself. You can give yourself time or you can receive time from yourself. And both are important. Both are valuable, just as you can give to others. And through the giving to others, you're receiving joy for actually taking care. And so many people love that, and that's wonderful. When those we love, like I love to give you time, or maybe it's giving in terms of like holding space if there's a really strong conversation, or I know we say paying attention, but as we were talking a little bit earlier, actually giving attention, because kind of paying seems like transactional. But if I want to give you my attention, like that's to me, that's more of a heart-centered approach. That's saying, hey, I'm giving of myself to you, and from that I'm receiving immediately, like in parallel, I'm receiving a connected experience with the person I love. So I can't not give and receive at the same time. And I feel like that's kind of a misunderstanding, that when we start to dive into it more and we do recognize that, then the harmony that we're experiencing is more intentionality behind the giving and receiving. So that way, when we do make the choices, that those choices aren't in alignment and more connected to who we are. And therefore, giving and receiving happens together, and it will always be in balance.
Yes. And I feel like there's an opportunity we can have shared experiences, but not codependent experiences.
Nice.
When we look at it in a way that we understand that giving and receiving are very tied together from an internal experience, right? And I take love as a primary example of that. Because for me, love is something that I give 100%. And if it isn't returned, that's okay. I'm still receiving love through the giving of love. There is no expectation that it is returned. There is no need for it to be returned. just the simple act of loving someone means that I am receiving love. Therefore, the codependency, the need to love myself through someone else has been removed. I feel love. I am love because love is flowing through me to all things and everyone. Therefore, I get to exist in a state of love at all times. That's my choice. And it removed a codependency I had of, okay, I will only feel loved if when I love Austin, I feel the love back. What actually begins to happen for me now is the fact that I love you. I get to feel that love for you. And so I'm receiving love. And then when you love me back, it amplifies that feeling. But it's not like I'm dependent on that feeling. If at some point you are like, I cannot return to amplify that love, okay, so would it be sad? Of course, I'm human. It would be very sad. But would it take away the love and the feeling of love that I have? No, I still get to feel the love. My love for you is not dependent upon your love for me. And so I still get to give and receive love for Austin. And it's amazing. It's one of the most beautiful and amazing things I've ever experienced in my life. And so that's one thing that I truly hope every person gets to experience at some point in their life. The removal of like codependency and the embracing of giving and receiving can be simultaneous and an internal experience. If we begin to realize that we can amplify each other, but we don't have to determine what our experience of each other is, if that makes sense.
It totally does. Well, it releases expectation. It releases the feeling of guilt or debt on either side, and it promotes freedom.
Yeah.
It really does. We feel free because we can't give what we don't already have. And if we have it, then it has been received. And so it's this beautiful understanding of that. That's why every time we talk about giving or receiving, bringing that pitcher, when it's an overflowing pitcher of water, the receiving is in that it's full. Like it's always full. And so it has more to give.
Yeah.
And so the cups around it can be filled up because the pitcher is overflowing. And so I love that. I feel like that's such a critical aspect when it comes to personal growth and personal transformation. That's a fundamental shift on how to approach life. Because when we do that and we do have that understanding and it clicks, and it's how we choose to interact with the world is exponentially different. And so we start making choices, whether that's how we think, how we manage our emotions, how we connect, spiritually beyond here to those around us, to nature, and even physically, how we give and receive physically in different ways, whether it's things or of ourselves. In some ways, it's amazing. It becomes so intentional and purposeful, and it does feel that harmony occurs because all of the choices we're making are in that intention, are balanced in their approach.
Yeah. The other thing I would reflect is if someone is giving me, like when you give or gift me your love, your time, your attention, your focus, it is up to me how I receive that. So if I'm receiving it by being on my phone and not paying attention to you, then I'm not fully receiving the gift that you're giving me.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, time is the most precious thing we have here in the linear experience that we're having, right? Mm-hmm. Because we don't get to take anything with us when we leave. This is my perspective. Like everyone has their own view of it, My view is your time is the most precious gift you can give me. Because when we look at what we take with us when we leave here, from my view, what we take with us is the energy of the memories that we create together. That I will take with me. I don't take the car. I don't take the house. I don't take the money. I take the energetic impression that you leave on my consciousness, on my soul. And so if I take the time to connect with you and receive the gift of you that you're giving me, then I get to take that with me. That's a part of you that I get to take with me. And so how I choose to receive that is up to me. So do I choose to put my phone down? Do I choose to pause the television? Do I choose to stop what I'm doing? That's totally up to me. Maybe I'm in the middle of something and I can't, but then I could choose to say, Austin, I'm in the middle of something right now that cannot be paused. Is there an opportunity for us to pick this back up when I can pause this? Because we're going to be in the middle of things like that.
Right. And that's something I have to be aware of. I can't just expect you to drop everything just when I want to give you my time. Right. That's, to me, that is a balance or harmony of giving and receiving. Of I can't just throw that on you when you're in the middle of something. And so and then if you don't respond, then I can't just be like, oh, well, she doesn't love me.
Yeah.
And so then that's completely unfair to you. And that's not a balance in any way.
Yeah. But those are things that we can begin to navigate through.
Right.
But it starts first with the conscious choice of how do I desire to receive what is being given to me? And what does it mean to me? Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to believe the way that I believe. But if we begin to ask ourselves those questions, what do I believe? Then we can start to make those choices. And so it goes back to what we were discussing at the beginning of this podcast. The first thing we need to do is ask ourselves, what is my desired experience in all these aspects of my life? So that I know how I desire to receive, how I desire to give, and how I desire to unfold this experience that I'm calling my life. Otherwise, we have no point of reference from which to begin making these choices. And that's where this giving and receiving journal will begin to help frame that out, because sometimes we don't even know where to start. Like, what questions do we even ask? We have coaches that can help. If anyone needs a coach, they can just log on and we can align them up with a coach too, if that would be helpful. But we can wrap up this year strong in heart and mind, and really set out next year in a framework where it doesn't feel like we're wrapping things up like we just ran a marathon that we cannot finish.
One thing I'd really like to kind of dive into, because it's so natural to think of giving and receiving and thinking of a physical thing like a gift. What examples can we provide that are more of the intangible giving and receiving? Because, yeah, we can start to practice everything we're saying in terms of the physical. Well, and that could even be your physical self of, okay, well, hey, I don't give myself enough time. I don't receive enough time to just relax or self-care or self-love and that kind of standpoint. But what about the more of the emotional aspects? What about the mental aspects and the spiritual aspects? Those are the kind of things I'd love to provide some examples that we can maybe walk through to give people who haven't really thought about this for the first time a stair step to kind of say, oh yeah, I can grasp that and move forward, because I know that helped me a ton.
I will say that to begin, whether we're aware or we're not, energetically, we're always giving and receiving.
Yes.
Right. And I'll point out, like, if you've ever walked into a space and there's someone in there who's just happy and bubbly and they just light up the room, you can feel that. You can literally feel, and their energy is almost contagious. It's because they're giving off that energy that just makes you feel as happy as they feel. Likewise, you've likely walked into a room where someone is the opposite of that. And that has set the tone for the space equally as much. And so we know just by experience, tons of scientific research that shows the same, like how our biofields set energetic tones around us and how it's shared. But we don't have to have the science to know the feel. Like, we've all felt it. Walking in, being lifted up by the energy of a space, walking in and being really like pulled down by the energy of a space. And so if we've all experienced it, then we can also choose which way we want to contribute to the energy of a space, right? We can say to ourselves, my mood will affect the energy of a space that I am in. Whether I am consciously contributing or not is up to me. I can be neutral, I can be happier, or I can be the one that sucks the air out of the room. And so then we get the conscious choice from our energetic standpoint. We're going to have bad days. It's not like we have to be on all the time. But if we're consciously aware that our energy contributes to how other people will experience the space around them, then at least we're not going to kind of go into work every day and not make some type of choice of how our energy flows. We can say, hey, maybe I just need to listen to a Lady Gaga song and kick it up and make things a little more upbeat. Or maybe I don't need to be negative, I just need to be neutral. How do I take the steps up to neutral? And then we can do the mental and emotional framework to bring ourselves up to that with some type of an affirmation that helps us remember that in the relative scheme of things, we're doing pretty well, right? And so affirmations can help us clear our mental framework and take ourselves from that negative brain bias, which we talk about so often, because we've created kind of this negative cycle in our minds, whether it is actual or it is not actual. It is just something that spins, right? We tend to think more negatively than may actually be occurring in our life. And so if we can do something to just interrupt it and redirect it, then it allows us to get to neutral. We're not saying you have to love everything around you and see rainbows and puppy dogs and unicorn kisses. We're saying neutral. See that the world is maybe a little bit better than what we think and get to a neutral space. And if we can do that with positive affirmations, then the energy that we're giving can be received at least a point that isn't going to pull someone else out of what they would consider their balance. So that would be something I would offer.
I like that. I feel like that's really strong, and using the energy as the base, the foundation for how we approach it, because our thoughts can be shaped by it, our emotions can be shaped by it, and just kind of just how we feel on a soul level can be shaped by it. And so I feel like another aspect that you just brought up kind of reminded me of something that is not necessarily tangible, but I feel like where there becomes a disconnect in the giving or receiving. And that is that this focus on the result of the giving and the receiving versus the process of the giving and receiving. So yeah, it's just when we're stuck in the result, then we are kind of making it tangible, and we're making it something that we're almost an expectation of what we should be getting out of it. It becomes the transactional aspect of it. And I feel like that kind of drops the energy level in terms of its purpose and its intention. But when we are focused on the process of giving and receiving, as you're saying, that's part of what we're doing every day in life. Well, that's what the world is doing. That's literally what the universe is doing. It's in the constant process of giving and receiving simultaneously. And so when we have that recognition and awareness, and we are making a choice that we're seeking to be aligned with the universal structure, and therefore the earth structure, and therefore the societal structure. And so we can recognize that, hey, this is happening, and we can jump into that flow, less worried about the results of what's occurring, and really focusing on, okay, here's the process, here's how it's flowing for me, and here's how I can understand if I'm in the flow or out of the flow. And because once we're in the flow, then the idea of a negative or lower vibration, or negative energy or negative thoughts, or feeling down, all these start to fall away, because we're losing the need for the reliance on the expectation of how we think we should feel, or what we think we should think, or how we should be presenting ourselves, or good, bad, any of this kind of stuff. And just recognize that every choice we make is a form of giving and receiving. All choice is a process for experience. And so by default, so is giving and receiving. So when we can pull into that giving and receiving, recognize the harmony of it, then we can actually experience it all around. It'll just kind of start to fall into place. And it's this beautiful, beautiful harmony and balance.
Yes, so beautifully said. Because ultimately, again, as you brought up in the beginning, that we've been taught in so many ways that in order to be a good person, we have to give more than we receive. But in the flow, we don't really focus on what is good or bad, because ultimately it's all choice that leads to an outcome that informs us about our choice so that we can make the next choice. There is energy that comes out of that. And so if we're informing ourselves along the way, and our goal is to put out an energy that uplifts those around us, then we'll constantly be informed by our choice. Does it uplift me? If it uplifts me, then chances are high it will uplift those around me. And so in the flow, that will allow you to understand how directionally you are navigating in the flow of your life. First, you build your boat by knowing what you desire to experience. Then you start to make the choices that will direct you in the flow. And if it is lifting you up and making you feel good, if we call it good, but it's making you feel happy, then your happiness is by far going to emanate out and help those around you feel happy. But it's because you're conscious of what you desire, the choices you're making, and how those choices are making you feel, which will then impact the energy that you're putting out. But if you get to a point where it's starting to make you just feel like neutral, then maybe there's an adjustment that you need to make to your boat, to what you desire, to help navigate you back to what will make you feel uplifted, good, happy, so that you can steer back into your giving and receiving. Because a happy heart is abundant, it's full. And so I think that's a really beautiful way to put it.
Thank you. Yeah, we do this so naturally with music, and I'm going to keep bringing this up because we actively choose music that's aligned with how we're feeling. And oftentimes it's usually to help us get to something, maybe get through something, or it's like a goal state that's relative to, right? There's intentionality. Obviously there's times we just put music on, whatever's on, and that's fine. But, maybe if we're feeling sad, we put on a song that helps us remind us of things and helps us get through it. Or maybe we want to go work out, so we need some like really amped music. Or maybe we're just really happy and we want, music to lift us up like that. None of those are good or bad. They're just intention, right? And so now if I want to be really, really happy and I choose a song that's more of a depressing experience or a sad song, that's not going to align. And so I'm not going to meet it in that way. And it's not going to fulfill the expectation that I'm attempting to put on it. And so the reason why I'm kind of bringing this forward is because we don't realize that sometimes it's our choices that we're making that are just not in alignment with what we are seeking. And so if we're choosing the wrong song for what our goal state is, then no wonder we're not going to reach it. And then we blame ourselves for not being able to get there. And then it becomes this cycle of loss or rejection or failure, all these, low vibrational or negative energy words. But if we take the time, as you're saying, to create that balance and write it down, get clarity, then we can bring more intention and conscious awareness into the act of the choice, which then could align us into that flow, into that giving and receiving flow. And so to me, giving and receiving is almost synonymous with feeling aligned.
I like that a lot. So as we're wrapping up, if you were to give your closest friend one piece of advice for how to begin to keep a giving and receiving journal, where would you tell them to start? What would be their point of entry? Would it be like a daily journal? Where would you tell them to begin?
It's a good question. I feel like it really depends on the person. And so it'd be more about just asking, what is the flow? There are some individuals who like the daily aspects of it. There's people maybe it's once at the end of the week, like maybe on Sunday nights. It's my reflection time. So I'm going to give my giving and receiving journal and what happened over the week. And I'm going to do that 4 times through the month. And at the end of the month, that final Sunday, I'm going to be like, wow. And not only am I going to check this week, but I'm also going to see my progress for the whole month. And so that's probably closer to like what I would do. So I'd seek to understand from a friend, what is their structure? What is their approach? Because maybe they'd like to do all 30 days and intermittently, when they think about it, write down certain things throughout the week and then be able to go over it at the end of the month. Maybe it's daily, but just the act of it is really, I feel like it's less about the volume or how much. It's really about the fact that you're doing it at all. And so even if it was once per month, that's more than what it was being done before, and compounds over the year. That's 12 times a year. That's 12 times more than you were doing it the previous year. So that is still extremely valuable.
And I love that, because a lot of times I've had individuals who are like, oh, I'm not doing it every day. I'm just going to stop. And there is no rule. If you find a tool and the tool resonates with you and you only do it once a year, it's still worth it. Because as you said, it's once more than you were doing it any other year that you were using it. So find the rhythm and the pattern that fits for you, because it's obviously going to activate something for you. There's a reason you were drawn to it. So allow it to speak to you in the way that it speaks to you. Don't allow it to be another reason to feel guilty for something.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just build on the energy that's pulling you down instead of lifting you up.
Yes. Any other bits of advice before we wrap up here?
I feel like being patient is a great opportunity to experience giving and receiving for oneself. I know that continues to help me a lot. Being patient, like giving patience to others, receiving it from others. In this fast-paced world, it's easy to just want to jump in or talk or get things done quickly, and just having that patience, that connection, that little extra couple seconds just to receive, patiently hear what someone is saying, or patiently, after you've heard, patiently wait, collect the thoughts, and then respond accordingly so that it's showing that you are listening. Those kind of things is just in life. That to me is a active giving and receiving is through patience. might need it during the holidays too. I think we all need a little patience during the holidays.
Gift. Great holiday gift.
Yes.
You don't even have to wrap.
No.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us, amazing Suivera community. I am your host, Amber, and I am here with co-host Austin as we talk about how our hearts and minds align. We are so grateful you joined us. Don't forget, we still have that free tool. And this month, it is the Giving and Receiving Journal. We have updated and we now have version 2.0. So be sure to go and check it out. All the details are in the link below. And if you happen to be listening to this and not watching, you can go over to suivera.org and check it out. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you in the Suivera community.